Hello and welcome to the EDHRECast, where we're all about Commander, data, and dad jokes. I'm Joey Schultz, and I'm joined by my fantastic co-hosts. Up first, he loves that the card Sire of Seven Deaths rules text is technically a haiku. It's Matt Morgan.
So did you know that when Lord of the Rings first came out, they made a Lego set for it, and they had all the different characters on there, but they couldn't get Orlando Bloom to sign over rights. And when they asked him, why couldn't you sign that, he said, well, it makes sense, doesn't it? Because I am Legolas.
Wow. Okay, cool. See, now, Matt, you're just making me wonder whether there's going to be a Universes Beyond Lego Lord of the Rings magic set. Like, is that going to happen?
I wouldn't put it past them at this point. I really wouldn't.
Honestly, yeah. All right, up next, he looks fondly at 2024 because he thinks that means having a creature with 20 power and 24 toughness. It's Dana Roach.
I've decided the first thing I want to do in 2025 is make breakfast. I figured the best way to start a new year is with a toast.
Okay. Sounds delicious, and I'm on board.
I love that.
And even I can't screw up making toast.
Well, hopefully you don't get things too scrambled on your end then.
Dana, I cannot say the same for myself. I burn lots of things when I cook. Anyway, what are we talking about this week, Dana?
We are going to be doing the 2024 Rifties, which are the best cards of the year 2024.
Yeah, we're taking a really interesting look at the cards from this past year and which ones deserve the top spots and fun stuff that we've seen throughout the year. Basically, we kind of want to end this year on a high note celebrating the really cool cards that we got. But we got a couple of things to get to before we dive into that main topic.
This show is being brought to you by Cardsphere.com, our favorite way to turn unplayed Magic cards into played Magic cards. You add money to your Cardsphere account either by sending out cards to people or depositing it like you would into any account, and people will send you their cards at the price you pick using money in that account. It's simple to use. I just got an Immortal Sun for a deck in the mail today, and I'll be sleeving it up right after this show. Just click on the link in the video description in the show notes to check them out at Cardsphere.com. This new year, crack a beer with Cardsphere.
Dana, your slogan game remains unmatched. You should get into that professionally.
I'm thinking about going into content creation.
Thinking about it.
And if you would like to support the show, there's a lot of ways that you can do that. You can like and subscribe on YouTube. You can subscribe on your local podcast app. There's all sorts of free ways to do that. But if you would like to, you can head over to patreon.com/EDHRECast. We have all sorts of patron tiers over there. You can join our Discord community. We're always interacting with folks over there, having conversations about different decks, different games. You can see our episodes a day early, get some bragging rights over your friends. There's all sorts of different things you can get over there at patreon.com/EDHRECast. And this week we have a very special shout out coming up for Devin Dixon. So Devin, I'm sorry that Daryl and Merle, your brothers, didn't really have very good fates in the Walking Dead series, but thankfully you're around long enough to subscribe over at patreon.com/EDHRECast. So thank you, Devin, for all of your support.
Heck yeah, thank you so much. Okay, guys, we're getting into the 2024 Rifties, which is basically the same level of prestige as like the Tonys or the Oscars or any of those things, right?
It is, yes.
Dana, walk us through this. This is something that you have some familiarity with. You're bringing forward this idea into our show here. What are the Rifties?
Yeah, so I used to do a podcast years ago called Commander Central, and my co-hosts and friends, Max Crandall, Chris Degnar, and Luke Witten, and I came up with this idea to do kind of a play on the Emmys or the Oscars. This was around the time that Cyclonic Rift was the scourge of the format, so we nicknamed them the Rifty Awards. And this is kind of our version of a year-end award ceremony for the best of each card type that was introduced to Commander each year.
Heck yeah. So, okay, how do we choose which one wins Best Picture or Best Actor or things like that? How are we making an actual choice, though?
Yeah, well, there's no set criteria for any of this. It's entirely subjective. Quentin Tarantino and Stanley Kubrick and Alfred Hitchcock never actually won Best Directors at the Oscars. So we're going to try to explain our rationale for our picks, but that rationale might be nothing more complicated than vibes, frankly.
Vibes is totally valid, though. I mean, that's Rachel Weeks' entire deck building mantras.
Right, exactly.
How is this deck coming along? It's just vibes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what Commander's all about, is the vibe. So yeah, we'll each pick a favorite for the category, probably let folks know which card is actually the number one most popular card of that category as well. And I'm kind of interested to see the times that we ourselves think that that most popular card is the card that we would pick pick as that instant or sorcery or creature of the year, and the times that we're like, yeah, no, I'm going to pick something else though. So like vibes may end up being the answer, but I'm interested to see the things that we've each picked as our favorite cards of each category for this year.
Yeah, there were just so many valid and deserving projects out there that wanted to be nominees, and we just couldn't afford to give them all their due time. But we want to thank everyone and all the designers for all their submissions and whatever else they say on the Tonys and the Oscars and all those projects.
It's an honor just to be nominated.
It's an honor just to be nominated. Yes, exactly.
All right. Dana, you are the most familiar with the Rifties, so start us off. Where is it that we're beginning with our awards ceremony here for 2024 cards?
So in no particular order, we're going to start with the best new sorcery spell of 2024. My pick here is the card I used it for Challenge Stats a couple months back, I believe. Eagle Vision that came out in the Assassin's Creed set. It's 4 in the blue, draw 3 cards, but it has free running. So for 1 in the blue, you can cast it if you dealt combat damage to a player this turn with an assassin or a commander. There's just so many decks where that's just a 2 mana draw 3. The rate on that is as good as anything you're going to see in Commander. It's not the card that goes in every deck, but with the decks it goes. I mean, that's an amazing draw rate, I think, and I just love that spell.
The free running mechanic has been very, very interesting. I'm a big fan of the overpowering attack card to get you extra combats with that stuff too. But yeah, it's sneaky powerful, that mechanic.
Yeah, if you have any way to trigger any of these free running cards fairly easily, you probably just want to give them a second look. Drawing 3 cards for 2 mana is incredibly efficient. So I can see very much why, Dana, you especially love this card, because that's just what it's doing. It's just massively efficient card draw.
What about your pick, Matt?
So my card that I wanted to talk about the most this year, Sorcery was probably the most crowded field for me as far as how many cards do I want to talk about versus how many can I actually nominate. So the card that I am putting forth as the best Sorcery this year, we talked about it a little bit a couple weeks ago, and it's one of the most played sorceries, but Sundering Eruption is 2 in a red for a sorcery. It says destroy target land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put on the battlefield tapped, then they shuffle, and creatures without flying can't block this turn. So it is an MDFC as well. So you can play it as a land that will enter tapped unless you pay 3 life and just adds a single red. This does so many things that I just love to be able to do. So if you have a problematic land, like say there's a glacial chasm out there, there's a Gaia's Cradle, anything going on over there, blow up that land, replace it with a basic. Oftentimes that's worth it, but then creatures can't block this turn, or creatures without flying can't block. And a lot of times there's just a gummed up battlefield. I love turning things sideways. So this just does a lot of things I love to do in so many of my decks. And it seems that there's over 33,000 decks out there that agree with that take.
Matt, I really, really like that pick too. At the times that I see Sundering Eruption, I'm just like, oh, this might have won someone the game. I actually feel the same way about that one as I do about the other MDFC in blue-white Suppression Ray, which reads as an energy card, but you can just have it tap all creatures that target player controls. And like, all right, cool, free attack. And I really like those utility effects on a lot of those MDFCs. So this one, I also agree. I think a lot of people have like discounted it at first when we saw all of the other things that the MDFCs of this year were doing.
Yeah.
But that one, when you see it, like, oh, if this one's being cast, you might be about to die. And that's a really cool thing to say about a card.
Oh, yeah.
No, that's a good point, because this is a card I discounted initially. Because I'm like, why wouldn't I just run another like Ghost Quarter-esque card in that slot that doesn't come into play tapped and will do the same thing? Except for I've just seen enough situations where the ability to keep creatures without flying from blocking this turn is relevant, especially late in the game when top decking that Ghost Quarter isn't relevant at all. Like, there's just enough situations that makes a huge difference. And yeah, this card's really, really good.
Yeah, the land destruction doesn't need to be the appeal. You can't block my stuff is a really cool appeal. For my pick, though, for top sorcery of the year, I came very, very close to considering cards like Fangs of Colonia, which is a new counter-doubling overload spell. I like Requisition Raid, which is a white spree card that will help you destroy artifacts and enchantments and buff up your entire team. And I was leaning towards those because I'm like, I don't want to be biased because I play a lot of graveyard stuff and I don't want the entire thing to just be. And then we were talking, we were like, no, Joey, be biased. And so I'm going to be biased, you guys. The most prolific card that I've added to my decks this year is Malevolent Rumble. I'm just in love with Malevolent Rumble. A 2-mana green sorcerer, reveal the top 4 cards of your library. You may put a permanent from among them into your hand, put the rest into your graveyard, create an Eldrazi spawn creature token that you can sacrifice to add a colorless mana. Matt, I think this is also a favorite sorcery of yours for this year. Like, oh, I just love this thing.
Yeah, Malevolent Rumbles. I saw somebody describe this, and this was for 60 card formats, mind you, not even Commander, but somebody said that this is just the green Ponder with how it comes out to play. You look at top 3 cards, you put one in your hand, the other one's going to your graveyard, or top 4, excuse me. This is absolutely a Ponder's type of powerful effect because you do get the mana refunded to you in the form of an Eldrazi spawn. I love this card. It's so good. It fills up your graveyard. It's getting you a card that you need. This just, again, it's kind of like my card. It does a lot of little things so well that you want to find room for it.
It's easy to look at this and kind of dismiss it as kind of a draft chaff filler card.
No, it is not.
It kind of is, except for it's like 5 draft chaff filler cards on one card and does all of those things at the same time.
I see what you did there.
Which is what's really useful about it.
Nice job.
And the fact that it's a permanent into your hand and not a creature, like a lot of times these are, is massive because you can use it if you like kept it, I don't know if I should have kept this hand, but now I can dig down 4 and probably find the land that I need. And if I happen to hit a land before, then who cares? Then it's a bonus. There's a sack trigger. You refund the mana. You've got the blocker. You've got like stuff in your graveyard that you might use for Reanimator. It just does just so many things on one little spell that when all is said and done is going to cost you a single green mana. Absurd.
Yeah, you know how Satyr Wayfinder is a 2-mana creature that fills your graveyard while also finding you a land, and it leaves you a body on the field that you can sacrifice for stuff, and how that shows up in 45,000 decks? Malevolent Rumble can find you any permanent from your top 4, and it still leaves you a body that you can even sacrifice for mana if you need to. I'm playing this card in like 5 decks. I just love it. I couldn't not pick it for my top sorcery of the year.
And it's a common too. It's really just kind of wild how powerful these commons have gotten. Another card in the same category that I really wanted to put in here too, Glimpse the Impossible. Same type of thing. You're getting just a lot of value for almost effectively like a very, very minimal mana investment. And like I said, the sorceries this year were so hard for me to pick because there's 5 other cards I could have talked about, whether it was Rootcast Apprenticeship or Arcane Heist has blown me away every time I've seen that card played. There's just so many that it was very, very hard for me to pick just Sundering Eruption.
Notably, though, none of us picked the top sorcery of this year, which is Insatiable Avarice, a black spree sorcery that can let you search your library for a card, shuffle and put that card on top, or let target player draw 3 cards and lose 3 life. This thing is extremely popular, showing up in 4% of decks that are eligible to play it. That's nearly 43,000 decks right now. Very, very popular, but I think for the 3 of us, we're like, been there, done that with the tutors, and we weren't necessarily quite as interested. So we found some stuff that really speaks to our personal play styles instead, I think.
But looking at this card, like, oh, yes, I understand why this is in a gazillion decks. Makes sense completely.
Absolutely. So those are our nominees for the top sorceries of the year. Listeners, get a hold of us. Let us know in the comments below what you think is your top sorcery of the year. Which of the nominees would you pick, or would you nominate something else? And we'll move on to our next category. Let's talk about the best new instant. Matt, what do you got for us?
So my nominee for best new instant, it's not one of the most played. It's a little bit further down the list than our other nominees we're going to talk about today. But the stories that have come out of this card, every time I've seen it, it's just been an absolute blowout. So I really want to talk about 3 Steps Ahead. It's a very powerful card. That would be my honorable mention. But my actual card I'm putting forth is Take the Bait, which is 2, a red and a white for an instant that says cast the spell only during an opponent's turn and only during combat. Then you prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to you and planeswalkers you control, untap all attacking creatures and goad them. After this phase, there is an additional combat phase. So this, right off the bat, we love kind of surprise spiders type of fog effects. Anything with a fog with upside, basically, we love on this show, whether it's Arachnogenesis, whether it's any sort of those cards in that category. And Take the Bait absolutely has just led to some of the wildest situations in combat I've seen in a while. I love this. Every single Magic Con I was at, I saw a chance for this to be played, and it did get played, and it just was such a blowout. It was so wild. So yeah, Take the Bait. It's not the most powerful card by any stretch of the imagination, but it leads to so many stories. And that's, to me, why it's the best instant of the year.
Yeah, it's really giving Illusionist's Gambit, but in a whole new color combination.
Yes.
Which makes it feel all the more surprising for it. And I love the extra goad that's tacked on top of that one. Yeah, also a personal favorite of the year, too.
Yeah, I agree with all of the things you said. I have nothing new to add other than I've seen this card 3 times, and every time it's made people laugh.
Yeah.
With, like, what it's changed or like the shock.
Yeah.
Because it altered what everyone thought was about to occur. Excellent pick.
An excellent pick, but not as excellent as my pick, as my nominee, Matt. My pick that I'm going to go for top instant, I think the card Fleeting Reflection is being slept on. This is maybe my sleeper hit pick of the year. This is a 2-mana blue instant from OTJ, and it is 2 mana to do any or all of the following. It gives a creature hexproof, which can blank a removal spell. It untaps a creature. Oh, look, surprise blocker in case you need it. And it also can turn that creature, if you want, into a copy of any other creature on the battlefield. So you temporarily turn something into a hexproof, untapped copy of the best thing in play. If this was like a charm, and just each one of those was like a bullet point, do this or this or this, I think we'd be like, ooh, that's a really cool charm. But it does all of those things. The last time I played this card, I turned a random token into an extra illustrious wanderglyph to pump up all of my artifacts by even more. This is how blue does combat tricks. I'm so enamored by this spell. I don't know if you guys have had any experience playing with it, but like anytime that you have Fleeting Reflection in your hand, you're like, the world is my oyster. And I really just absolutely adore this instant from this year.
So I haven't actually had a chance to play with it myself because, I mean, it's an uncommon that from Outlaws Thunder Junction wasn't really my cup of tea, but I see why you like this so much. And it looks like it's a kind of a theme with a lot of the cards that we like this year anyways, is it's doing a lot of little things, but it adds up to have such a massive effect and flexibility. I think that's probably one of the biggest things that probably the three of us maybe value a little flexibility. And this has that in spades. It is such a flexible way to get around so many different situations. I see why you love this card, Joey.
Yeah, it isn't ostentatious. It's only showing up in like 2,600 decks right now, but I promise this card is so freaking cool. And the stuff it lets you do is really, really neat. And Matt, like you said about your pick, it creates stories and often even laughs.
Well, you both picked cards that have kind of flown under the radar. This will be my most probably boring and obvious and popular pick among the cards that are out there. And my pick here is Withering Torment.
All right.
Sure.
2 in a black, destroy target creature or enchantment, and you lose 2 life. That's not remotely exciting or interesting. It's just a better version of a removal option that black has had before.
Feed the Swarm, yeah.
But the reality is, modern problems require modern solutions. And like at some point you need to put stronger and stronger removal spells in your deck and answers to the problems that are being presented. I just think that like as there are more and more problems hitting the table, you need to have ways to deal with those problems. And my games go better when I have ways to deal with the problem. So Withering Torment is a card that has gone into all of my black decks. It's not exciting, it is not flashy, but it solves problems, and you just need to solve problems.
Yeah, that's a perfectly valid argument for even why Dana Roach, who hates playing current cards, would play a newer card. Because Withering Torment, just black having access to enchantment removal, it's pretty new, but it's pretty powerful. Black has often suffered from being able to deal with that type of permanent. So yeah, I see why you just put so much value into that.
Yeah, and Feed the Swarm shows up in, get this, 18% of decks that are eligible to play.
Yeah.
That is wild. 450,000 decks. And that's the sorcery version that makes you lose life equal to the mana value of the thing that you're getting rid of. This is an instant for 1 more mana, but you're definitely only losing 2 life. And it's already shown up in 8% of decks that are eligible to play it. And Duskmourn is not that old. It's a pretty recent entry from this year. Dana, I can't deny, I put this in a whole bunch of my decks too. This is very good. I like it a lot better than a sorcery speed option to remove enchantments in a color that doesn't usually get that ability. But I still like Fleeting Reflection better.
It is a very good card. They're all excellent picks, as is the top instant showing up in 2024, Sink into Stupor in 91,000 decks. 9% of the million decks it's eligible to be played in, I believe. Is that a typo, or am I reading? That's correct.
Yeah, a lot of people updated their decks around MH3 to get cards like this into there, which is not surprising. To either return a spell or it's a land, a great instant. This card's amazing. I put this in a whole bunch of my own decks too. I think one of the reasons I didn't end up picking it is because it doesn't have the fun, the laughs, the stories that I think some of us were hitting on for this particular category. It's efficient, it's great,
Yep.
but sort of like the Withering Torment thing, you're just like, yeah, this is a good card. And maybe for Matt and I, it seems like we were looking for the silliness with the instant category, which is why we went with different picks.
Yes. Well, and I would say, like, I like Stinking the Super a lot, but I've had it in my hand where, like, it didn't quite do what I wanted it to do, and I've never felt that way about Withering Torment.
I also think that there's some amount of, I will never remember casting a Sink into Stupor. I will remember every single time that I have cast Take the Bait.
100%.
That's for me.
Fair.
That's what's influencing my decision making on at least the instant category. We'll get into other arguments one way, but it's so hard for me to argue against that. But I also see why folks Sink into Stupor, Fell the Profane, they're some of the most played cards of the year. I understand why. It's just for this category specifically and why I like it personally. Again, it's coming down to the stories that are coming from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, interestingly, Matt, we don't necessarily have that exact same feeling when we move to our next category, which is the top artifacts, our favorite artifacts from 2024. And you and I both converged on the card that actually is the most popular artifact of 2024, and that's Patchwork Banner.
Yeah.
A 3-mana artifact. As it enters, you choose a creature type. Creatures you control of the chosen type get +1/+1, and you add 1 mana of any color. This is a mana rock that is also attached to a glorious anthem for your creatures. Kindred decks are one of the most popular ways to play Commander. This is an incredibly popular card, showing up in 81,000 decks already, 5% of decks that are eligible to play it. And as a colorless card, that's especially huge to have still that much popularity amidst all eligible decks and not just decks of a specific color. Patchwork Banner is fantastic, and it really stole my heart too, even though I don't even play a whole bunch of Kindred strategies. So how come this time you and I both felt like we might nominate the card that is the top artifact of the year?
Well, I mean, powerful cards are powerful cards, and it's a $6 uncommon from a very recent set.
It's a $6
that should
uncommon?
tell people how powerful this card is. It's very easy. It's the same reason I like 3 Tree City. It's very easy to accidentally get 5 or 6 creatures that happen to share a creature type on the battlefield, and this is going to benefit from them. And that's not even counting the decks that are dedicated to a specific creature type either.
I actually didn't pick Patchwork Banner, but I was really close. It was on it was one of the 3 cards I was looking at. And had I gone that way, I could easily defend it. We could have all 3 had picked Patchwork Banner. It's just so good in so many decks. I
mean, if I had been allowed to pick an artifact creature, I would have chosen Giggling Skitterspike. But let's be real, Patchwork Banner is incredible. What was your pick this year, Dana?
This is so we talked about not picking something that was too personal. This is my most personal pick. The Key to the Vault.
Ooh,
it's an equipment for 1 and a blue. Whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, look at that many cards from the top of your library, and you may exile a non-land card from among them, and you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost.
Yeah.
I have a very specific deck where this really, really works. Equipment decks tend to not be running blue. I have a blue equipment deck. I have a commander that lets me equip it for free, so I'm not paying the 2 and a blue to equip it. And it's a Voltron deck, so this is very regularly look at a third of my library, put the best thing in that third of my library into play for free. It's just an absurd card in that deck. I don't know how many other decks where it's that crazy powerful, but you know what? We said there's no criteria here. This is just a card that makes me feel things whenever I've played it because it does something stupidly powerful every single time.
So Dana, this card was on my honorable mentions only because I've seen you play it, and it's been so powerful when I've seen you play it.
Sure.
That's my only context and point of reference. I haven't gotten to play it myself yet, but holy cow. I 100% agree. This card does so many just powerful things, getting to dig as deep as it does. It would be nice if it pumped up a little bit, but man, it's such a great card.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the thing. We look at equipment, we're it doesn't give a buff. It's not even giving you any evasion. We see the equip cost of 3 and we're 5 mana before we get this effect. I don't know. But I think also the thing we do is we associate a lot of those, you look at that many cards on the top of your library, and we expect that the card you'll be able to cast from among them might have a similar qualification the way that a Sunbird's Invocation does.
Yeah.
You look at that many, and the spell that you get also has to be that many or lower. Mm-hmm. That's not the case here.
Right.
This is just cool. Whatever is on the top, if it's a 9-drop, you're fine. That's great. Yeah. I've also seen this one in play, and I discounted it while it was in play. I will not be making that mistake going forward. This got a lot of free stuff. This is a very cool card to see. So Dana, I can't fault you. In terms of artifacts that will make smiles and make stories, you picked a dang good one.
Well, thank you very much. not that everyone wasn't a wonderful card to be considered here. It's like we said, it's an honor just to be thought of in these categories.
Shout out to the other nominees and all that. There were some just great, powerful artifacts this year, just in general. But yeah, Patrick Banner stood head and shoulders above for me. But even if Nuka-Cola vending machine weren't so narrow, I think that would have been super powerful, relying on food so much.
Yeah.
But then Codsworth Handy Helper, Joey, I'm going to break the rules that you set for yourself. That's an artifact. And it's great. It's so powerful. I really liked Codsworth. That had a lot of really powerful implications in a lot of my decks too.
Sorry, I real quick, I can't get over it. It sounded like you said Patrick Banner instead of Patrick Banner. And that is what I will be calling that card from here on out.
We'll have SpongeBob cards here soon, so it makes sense.
Oh no, you ruined it. Okay, let's just move to our next category.
Well, the next category here will be the best new enchantment of 2024. And Joey, what was your pick here for your favorite new enchantment of the year?
All right, best enchantment. There's a big, I don't know if elephant in the room is the way to say it. There's a really big contender this year, and I couldn't bring myself to pick the top enchantment of the year. And I know it's a highlight. We'll get to it, Dana. I think it's your pick. But I've personally become so enamored with the enchantment Ripples of Undeath. It's a 2-mana black enchantment that will mill yourself for 3 cards every turn, but you can pay a mana and 3 life to keep one of those cards if you need to. At 2 mana to mill yourself for 3 cards, that's already a good rate because we see a lot of other cards that help mill you for like 3 cards. They tend to be about 3 mana, stuff like Cemetery Tampering, for instance. But the ability for you to also snag an emergency card from among the stuff that you mill, like, oh, I really want the Cabal Coffers actually, that has made this feel like a very, very cool card compared to other Greyfiller options that we have in black. So this one just warmed my Necromancer's heart so much that I just had to pick it. So self-mill, my biases are totally flowing through the episode. I understand, but I like it. And I like that it's not even obnoxious about the way that it mills, the way that like mesmeric orbs or some other effects can be a little obnoxious or draw a lot of attention to you. So I went with something subtle for my enchantment pick, and I really like Ripples of Undeath.
Well, and Ripples of Undeath solves the problem that I have with a lot of self-mill cards is I don't want to accidentally self-mill a super important card that I actually wanted in my hand. And so being able to, actually just LOL-tee-hee, sorry about that, being able to pull it back out of your graveyard for a little bit of a cost, I think a lot of times that is more than worth the cost of just 1 mana, 3 life to, I didn't mean to mill that, actually I need that in my hand. That does pretty much the entire reason I hate playing self-mill decks is because I don't want to self-mill the important cards out.
They belong in a graveyard, but sometimes also in your hand. It can be with, I love this one so much. It's showing up in like 42,000 decks right now, 4% of decks that are eligible to play it. I just think it's a card that going forward is impossible to ignore if you're doing graveyard stuff. And it's
probably
understated in a way I really appreciate.
Well, in much like Malevolent Rumble, it's also one of those cards that like lets you keep a hand that might not quite have the lands you want because you're like, in a pinch, I can cast this on turn 2 and pay that extra mana, or turn 3, I guess, technically, because you need to have 1 mana free to get that land that you would have otherwise milled that you weren't caring about milling the land. You want to put creatures in the yard to get that land back to get your land dropped to turn 2. So like it has that early game utility, even if you're not ready to start reanimating stuff just yet. It just does the things that you want to do.
But I can acknowledge it is not the most popular enchantment of the year. And Dana, you're kind of conforming to trends with your pick here. What's going on, man?
For the second time, yeah. Over the years, like we've gotten various white enchantments that are like, this is finally the white Phyrexian Arena that's going to give white a repeated draw thing. And no, they've been varying degrees of successfully doing that. Trouble in Pairs did it. Like Trouble in Pairs, just full stop, is that white enchantment that sits there in play and is going to put cards in your hand very, very consistently every single time. It's 2 and 2 white. If an opponent begins an extra turn, that player skips that turn instead, which is just useful, but not necessarily what's important. What is important here, when an opponent attacks you with 2 or more creatures, or draws their second card each turn, or casts their second spell each turn, you draw a card. So you just draw a card. Like, you're going to draw a card every single time, at least, if not 2 or 3 cards, depending on what your opponents are doing. It's just ridiculous, and that's why it is so popular, and that's why it costs $25.
Yeah. This thing shows up in 5% of decks that are eligible to play it. 63,000 decks. it probably is the enchantment of the year, but it's so annoying. So that's why I didn't pick it.
It is very hard to keep track of and keep up with, but you are right, Dana. It's pretty much guaranteed to do something every single turn. It's a very, very powerful white draw effect that we wanted for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Matt, what was your pick? Did you also go with something really ostentatious in the same way, or?
So I wanted to. I did consider Trouble in Pairs. I also considered War Leader's Call. I love those types of effects too. But the card I'm going to put forth is Innkeeper's Talent. It's 1 and a green for a enchantment. It's a class. Level 1, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then you can pay a green to go up to level 2, which gives permanents you control with counters have Ward 1. And then at level 3, which is 3 and a green, if you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many of each kind of those counters on that permanent or player instead. So a way to kind of get a doubling season for your counters that you're putting out there type of effect. This is just such a powerhouse in a lot of my +1/+1 counter decks. And I realized the more that I looked at Innkeeper's Talent, I have a lot of cards that just incidentally have +1/+1 counter synergies on there. And so this absolutely is just such a powerful card in so many varieties of decks, even if it's not a dedicated +1/+1 counter deck.
It's the cheapness of it is really catching my attention here. It's very easy to get that protection and to just like place little things here and there. An interesting thing I notice about +1 counter decks is that we have a lot of +1 counter payoffs, but sometimes we forget to put the cards that actually put the counters on things.
Yeah.
We sort of load up on like a Forgotten Ancient and think that'll be good. But like, no, we actually do need a couple of things that will provide you with the counters in the first place. This does that. I'll admit for myself, if I were to go with one of the talents from Loomborough, I think Caretaker's Talent.
Caretaker sounds great. Yep.
Really captured my attention with like rewarding you for the tokens, but that's because I play more tokens as opposed to counters. I think I have like 1 +1 counters deck. But Matt, you've got yourself a really big niche of playing a whole bunch of stuff that gets real big. So I see why you like the thing that rewards you for having all the big stuff, especially when it can turn into a branching evolution when you level it to level 3.
Yeah, absolutely. And I thought about Caretaker's Talent too. I haven't gotten a chance to play with one yet. So I felt kind of weird. I've only seen one in play actually for Caretaker's Talent. Then that was in a 60 card format. So I couldn't really in good faith put that out there, but I do see why it is so powerful.
Yeah, as we were saying in our Oscars-worthy voices, all fantastic entries, all wonderful potential nominees. But like genuinely, I think Enchantments was actually the harder one for me to pick this year. Matt, you said that something like Sorceries was a really crowded field for you. Enchantments had a lot going on this year that I thought was very, very cool. So this was a hard category to pick. Listeners, I'm really curious to hear which of them are your favorite picks of the year for Enchantments. That'll move us, though, to our next category. Dana, what do you got?
The best creatures of 2024, and the first nominee is Storm Splitter. 3 and a red for an Otter Wizard with haste. And whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, create a token that's a copy of Storm Splitter, and you exile that token at the beginning of the next end step. So you make one token that's a copy of Storm Splitter when you cast that first spell, and then they each will make a copy of Storm Splitter when you cast that second spell and the third spell, and so on, and they all swing out. I think it's actually a very, very fun design, but they're also like 1/4s. You can build up a crazy board state with these and swing in for a good amount of damage and cause a lot of problems. But it's also not one of those cards that feels like you just win the game when you hit it out. You have to actually have a very particular deck to make it do work. But it's just a fun card. Like this card, whenever I've played it or seen it played, it's just fun, and like you just start seeing silly things happening. Like Matt mentioned earlier, this is a great story card, and particularly for creatures, I always look for a good story. Maybe for some reason more than, a utility spell. I tend to like think of in terms of instants or sorceries, and I wanted something that made for good stories. And this year, Storm Splitter was a creature that I felt like made for the most good stories.
Nice, and it's an otter, so it's really cute while it's killing you.
There we go. Yeah. Exactly.
I was torn on creatures this year. I think I wound up kind of leaning more into convention here with some of the most popular creatures of the year. The most popular creature of the year is Witch Enchanter. 7% of decks that can play it are doing so. That's the MDFC, sort of the white Reclamation Sage that can be a land on the other side. I think I was so focused on those because a lot of those types of cards have made their way into my decks. And the one that I know is just going to be bugging me for forever is Boggart Trawler. That's the Bajuka Bog-esque MDFC here. It can be a land on one side, but it's also a goblin that can exile target player's graveyard on the front half. And it's not a bad stat line. It's a decent creature type even. It's a very, hey, Watsy, thanks, I hate it, type of card. I think those are the ones that have captured my attention. And even though I hate things exiling my graveyard, probably that's why Boggart Trawler looms so big in my mind here. But this also is an effect that I'm using to try and make sure that my opponents don't do the same gross graveyard stuff that I'm trying to do. So I think I end up going with Boggart Trawler as my pick for the best creature of the year, or the most important one in my brain at least.
Yeah, if a card is powerful enough to get Joey to talk about Grave Hate, it's probably worth mentioning for everybody else out there. But yeah, again, it's just another case of the MDFCs being so flexible and doing well. That, you want to include it in so many decks that you have it as a land. Oh, I need a 3-mana nick somebody's graveyard because they're getting ready to combo off or whatever. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like Dana's Withering Torment. You want to have this type of effect in your decks almost no matter what.
The one toughness on it makes it easily skull clampable. If you revive it, you're going to get that effect a couple more times if you need to, and that's very easy to do in this color. There's a lot going for it in ways that are really annoying. Wizards, why'd you do this to me? And yet I'm also taking advantage of it myself. So that's why I think it just like looms so big in my brain here. But those are our picks. Matt, how about yours?
So I really didn't want to make a decision because there were so many really, really good creatures out there this year. I loved getting to cast Aven Interrupter. There's a bunch of cards out there like that. Vaultborn Tyrant. Yeah. But it's also hard for me to like a $40 card and say it's good because we'll know duh. So I'm going to cheat here. I'm just going to say the entire Enduring Cycle. I know I'm taking the easy way out here, but oh my gosh, I've said a few times on the show, it's the best cycle we've gotten in a long time. And I maintain that because every time I've gotten to play one of these cards, it's changed the course of the game. Whether it's Enduring Vitality, which is the green one, that comes down, gives all your creatures a Cryptolith Right type of effect where you get to tap to add 1 mana of any color. Enduring Innocence, which lets you draw cards when creatures power 2 or less enters the battlefield. But the important part of this Enduring Cycle is you have to kill these things twice. It comes down and they're enchantment creatures, but then if they die, if Enduring Vitality, for example, dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control as an enchantment. And that is such a important thing to have. I love this cycle. Everyone has found a home in some sort of deck for me.
All right, well, if you're cheating to pick a whole cycle, I pick all the MDFC creatures. No, I'm kidding.
That's fine.
These are truly fantastic. I might change my pick to yours, Matt.
Well, one thing worth noting, too, it's not only that you have to remove them twice, the second time is harder than the first.
Yeah.
Because the second time they're an enchantment. So you're only allowed to use enchantment removal or just, general removal to get rid of them versus the first time where, okay, you can have a Swords to Plowshares in hand, but you need to have specifically enchantment removal for the second time around. They are absolutely enduring is the perfect world. They stick around forever and cause nothing but problems. And all 5 cards in the cycle are good. This isn't one of those cycles where there's a standout or 2 and there's a couple of ones that just feel like afterthoughts. Every one of these is excellent card.
I've like I said, any single time I've had an opportunity to put one of these in a deck, I've looked for it. It's just, you want this type of effect in pretty much any deck that is playing those colors. And so if I had to be serious about this, like I said, I mentioned a couple others. A card that I seriously wanted to talk about more is Dreamtime Whale. That card, putting pressure on your opponents, has been really, really fun to watch. It's 2 and a blue for a creature whale with Vanishing 2, which you take counters off every turn, and then you sacrifice when the counters are gone. But whenever a player casts their second spell each turn, you proliferate. That put a lot of pressure onto a lot of opponents that I didn't see coming. So I was very surprised how much I liked Dreamtide Whale, but overall, the Enduring Cycle will endure so much longer than the whale will stick around.
Yeah, that whale is really cool. That also feels to me like a potentially underrated card. I came close to picking Sire of 7 Deaths because that is such a cool, new, iconic card.
It's a haiku.
It's a haiku. The rules text is a haiku. Half the cards that we get from each set are creatures. This is technically the most crowded field. There are so many amazing things to pick from. I like your tactic of choosing an entire cycle because that's a really good way to cover a whole lot of bases. So you might be running away with this one when people let us know what their favorites of these picks are, or if they let us know what their individual picks are, if they like a creature that we didn't name here. So much going on in the creature category, so much so that I think we probably need to move on to a less crowded category so that we can cleanse the palette a little bit here. Let's talk about the best new Planeswalker, which there weren't a whole lot of this year. Only like 12 or 13.
Although I would say I actually quite like the fact that they've really cut back on the amount of Planeswalkers per set. It makes them much easier to look at and take seriously and consider in a way that I felt like the last few years when we were getting, 50 or 60 a year sometimes, it felt like the specialness of them had gone away. I feel like we're back to where we were once upon a time, where it felt like a big deal to see a Planeswalker in a game or see it cracked in a pack.
Mm-hmm. Dana, which Planeswalker did you go with?
My personal favorite, and again, this is very vibey because it's a creature-esque situation here. I really like Grist Voracious Larva.
Okay.
Single mana, death touch 1/2, and whenever it or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it came into play from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, you can pay a single green, and if you do, you flip Grist into the Planeswalker form. It's got just gross art. And I like Grist as a character. I think it's such a unique Planeswalker compared to, all of the very typical attractive humanoid Planeswalkers we have. I'm just a fan of everything about it, and I especially like this iteration.
You know what, Dana? I had actually picked for my potential Planeswalker of the year also a 1-mana thing, one of those flip walkers. I had initially picked Tamiyo, Inquisitive Student, because 1-mana 0/3 flyer, it gives you a clue token when you draw your third turn, it'll flip, and the abilities on the backside are pretty cool, but I don't know if you're supposed to do this mid-award ceremony. I'm going to switch my pick to yours.
Everyone's voting for the gross little dude.
Yeah, I'm just like, and 1-mana 1/2 death touch is also just cool. It's got the neat graveyard stuff going on. We said before we started recording, Joey, feel free to lean into your biases. I'm doing it. There weren't a ton of Planeswalkers to pick from this year, but I will go with the one that says graveyard on it. I think Tamiyo is pretty neat, though. That +2 effect that it's got, I feel like it's easy to flip, and it's easy for her to defend herself and get to that ult pretty quickly. But Grist's ult is just cool and clever, and it does a thing that I like seeing from a Planeswalker Ultimate. For each creature in your graveyard, you'll make a copy of it that is an insect. That's neat. That's the kind of thing I haven't seen before, and that's an aspect of Planeswalkers that I enjoy. So yeah, I'll switch over to yours. The 1-mana Planeswalker flip things of this year is a neat thing to see and to linger in.
What do you have for us here, Matt? Are you going with Grist too?
Yeah, you gonna switch over?
I'm not going to go with Grist. Okay. No, I'll stand true to my own biases as well. So Ral Monsoon Mage is going to be my nominee for Planeswalker of the Year. This one, anytime you see a cost reduction on any card, you want to give it a second glance. And I think a lot of folks really didn't give it with Ral Monsoon Mage just because so many people were playing it in Modern. It was kind of the backbone of a modern mono red Storm deck. And also it got pretty expensive. It was, $6 or so. And for a 2-drop, that's, sometimes a lot. But Ral is 1 in a red for a creature human wizard 1/3, and it says instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 generic mana less to cast, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell during your turn, flip a coin. If you lose the flip, Ral deals 1 damage to you, and if you win the flip, you may exile Ral, and you can return him flipped onto the backside with all sorts of abilities there too. But really having just a cost reduction mechanism for your instants and sorceries with upside. So just Ral does a lot of just little things really, really well that typically, you're only seeing in Izzet colors. So if you have a Spellslinger type of deck that isn't containing blue, you probably want to give Ral a look because you are getting so much of a bonus and upside from that cost reduction. And again, it was just absolutely housing people at the Modern Pro Tour right when Modern Horizons 3 came out.
We all picked Flipwalkers, and Joey's even his changed pick, the Tamiyo, was a Flipwalker as well. Yeah. That's actually my favorite iteration of Planeswalkers, I think, because they tell a story, which I really like on a card. Like, you have this pre-version of the character we all know and see as a Planeswalker. You can just see them younger before their spark was ignited. Right there in one card. That's just a great mechanic in a whole bunch of ways, and I think that's definitely one of the reasons I picked Grist, and I think that's why we all like this as well, and I hope we see this kind of thing more often going forward.
Yeah, and why another one of the more popular ones from this year was Sorin of House Markov, which is doing some extort and lifelinky stuff and flips into a classic Sorin type of ability. Although the most popular Planeswalker of the year, Matt, it's funny that you would pick Ral Monsoon Mage. The most popular one was Ral Crackling Wit, which is the 4-mana otter art version of Ral from Bloomburrow, which gets more loyalty counters as you're casting more and more non-creature spells. It's showing up in 4% of decks that are eligible to play it. It's a 2-color card, so that is a lesser amount, but we do see that a lot with Planeswalkers that are doing all this type of character stuff. I guess I'm a little curious, Matt, why you went with Ral the Flipwalker as opposed to Ral the Crackling Wit as your pick of the year. Is there you just like the cost reduction, I assume?
I mean, the cost reduction is the big thing. I think there's a lot of pull, and none of the Planeswalkers this year really jumped out to me as, this is a powerhouse type of card, game breaking, anything like that. And like Dana said, we just didn't get very many Planeswalkers this year, and I think that's probably playing a little bit of effects here. Crackling Wit is a great card. If you're playing some sort of prowess deck, Spellslinger, it's going to get out of hand pretty quickly, especially when the ultimate ability that isn't really all that hard to reach of being able to -10 to draw 3 cards and you get an emblem that says instant and sorcery spells you cast have Storm. That just gets out of hand. Storm is not a mechanic to be messed with. And yeah, so I see the power of that. I think just more consistently Ral's Monsoon Mage, on the other hand, probably just gives you a more consistent benefit throughout the games. And I've seen it a little bit more too.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the lesson for the Planeswalkers is like the exciting things that it looks like they can do versus the consistency that they'll actually provide you. And some of the Flipwalkers are really good at providing some of that early consistency to then flip at the time that you can defend them and then start getting into those cool ultimates. So that makes a lot of sense. But I mean, there's only a handful of options from this as opposed to the crowded field that was the creature category. So Planeswalkers are really interesting. I'm curious to hear what other folks out there will pick for this one. That does move us now to our next category here about the best new land of the year. And Matt, you had talked about how you enjoy Three Tree City, which is the most popular land of the year. Presumably that's your top land of the year, right? I mean, it's showing up in 94,000 decks right now.
It is up there.
Is this your pick for nominee?
It is not, actually. So Three Tree City, I love this card. I think it is super, super powerful. But again, I'm going to cheat here, and I'm going to choose an entire cycle of lands, and that's going to be the Surveil lands.
Yeah.
I think that these combined, Three Tree City is a great card. It's one of the most played cards of the year for a very good reason, as we talked about before. But the upside of having fetchable duels that give you control over your next top deck at instant speed when you combine them with fetch lands or anything going on like that, the Surveil lands are super, super powerful in ways that just I'm still discovering, even as a player who's been playing for 15 years. This is such a great land cycle. Anytime you get fetchable dual lands, you have to give it a second look.
I'm so with you here. I also picked the Surveil lands.
There we go.
I've said that Three Tree City, I think it's better in like tokens decks than it is in kindred decks. I think that there are places where it shows up where it doesn't necessarily pay off the best in the way that people might expect that it does. So I consider that card a little bit like, be more cautious with it and don't go willy-nilly with Three Tree City. But the Surveil lands, I do not feel that way. These cards are not okay. Like they have
you don't have to be cautious with these at all.
They're fetchable. They can fill your card with an extra yard. These have changed the way that I interact with my decks when I get a fetch land or a Farseek or anything like that. Matt, it might have been you or Dana, I don't know if it was you, who was talking about how Wizards took like 2 leaps with these.
Right.
They were giving you the land types and also moving the Scry to a Surveil, which has a graveyard applicability here. These cards are not all right. Like they have to be my lands of the year. As much as I want to pick other things like Shifting Woodland, which is a great land. I have to pick the Surveil lands. They're so good.
This actually might have been my hardest category. There were so many good lands this year that came into the format, including the Surveil lands, which I strongly considered, except for the fact that Talon Gates of Madara probably changed the course of more games I've played this year than any single card I saw from 2024.
Really?
And I would dare say it's not close. Whether it's like the worst case scenario is it's just kind of a terrain generator that lets you put a land into play for 4 mana. Not a great rate, but like not terrible. That's the worst case scenario, because when it enters the battlefield, one target creature phases out, and that's an ability on a land. So like protection from colors and things like that don't affect that. Whether it's me playing this just for 4 mana or playing it before I cast a board wipe as my land or getting it off a cracked Urza's Cave and either saving my creature or phasing out a creature that was going to cause a bunch of problems for a turn. This has just changed the course of so many games. I can't stress how amazing this card has been for me this year. I started off putting in a couple decks to test, and it's one of those things where like every week when I go to my LGS, I would like, I want to grab another Talongate for this deck. Oh, this one doesn't have it either. I'm going to put one on my Cardsphere list. Like I've started off with 2 of them, and I now have, I think, Talongate in like all of my decks. It has been so impactful. I can't stress enough how great this card is.
Well, and the synergy that you pointed out, Dana, combining it with Urza's Cave, which is another possible nominee for Land of the Year, really.
Sure, yeah.
You can tap it to add a colorless mana, but you can pay 3 and tap it, sacrifice Urza's Cave to search your library for a land card, put on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. It's just any land card. So you can grab a Field of the Dead, you can grab a Valakut Molten Pinnacle, you can grab a Talongates, you can grab literally anything with Urza's Cave, and I think that type of flexibility at instant speed, there's so much going on there. I saw somebody Urza's Cave for a Glacial Chasm in the face of a lethal Alpha Strike.
Right.
There's so much play with Urza's Cave, and that's not even, we haven't even gotten to Shifting Woodland yet.
Right.
There's a lot of really, really powerful lands that came out this year. It's really hard to pick. You could name any land really that came out this year, and I wouldn't fault you at all.
I came so close to picking Shifting Woodland for mine, but I had to cheat and pick a whole cycle with Matt.
Yeah.
We picked 10 things for ours.
It's fun to cheat things into play, Joey. You're a necromancer. I like sneak attack. We're cheating all the time.
When you fetch into a surveil land, you put a 9-drop into your graveyard, and then you animate dead that on the very next turn. That's not okay, Wizards. You shouldn't let me do these things.
Yeah. There's so much play with all of these. I agree with you, Dana. There's so many different ways you could go with all these lands. It's hard to pick.
Yeah, very contentious category. Listeners, let us know what your favorite land of the year is. That moves us to another one. This isn't a specific card type. We're moving on to some actual categories here of best new mechanic. So not a specific instant source or anything like that. The new mechanics of the year. So we got stuff like free running and gift and stuff like rooms, which hint, is the kind of thing that Dana, you and I really bonded over this year. Rooms was our collective pick for our favorite mechanic from 2024.
Yeah, rooms is really kind of strange because when I first glanced at it, it's like, oh, it's just another variant of, the split cards kind of thing we've had in the past. Or the joke that like everything is kicker, depending on what you want to do. But it's not. It's just like a really great version of something we've had before. You can pick which version of the effect best suits you in the moment, and you very rarely feel bad about not activating the second half. And when you do activate the second half, it's usually to like push something over the top. Most of them were designed with like very useful modes both ways. It's just like Matt talked earlier in the show about how much we like cards that have flexibility. These are just so flexible. It's just a mechanic that like, I think it reminds me when I first saw Sagas, and I'm like, oh, that just feels right. I really like the execution on this all the way down. This is the next iteration of that to me, where I'm like, yeah, this just feels right. I love how it was designed.
Yeah, it's a split card that you get to play both halves of when you want to play them. They inspired me to build a Marina Vendrell deck. I just adore rooms so much. They've been fascinating to explore, and I do love all right, here's one that you can use now, and then here's a really cool effect to get later. I've played a handful of these in non-dedicated room decks. Porcelain Gallery, for instance, pumping up all of your creatures equal to the number of creatures you have. That's an unreasonably good win condition. Polluted Cistern, doing so much damage whenever you mill yourself, which I am wont to do occasionally in games of Commander. Like there are just some that are just very, very effective, very powerful, and they've got other cool things tacked onto them. They've been delightful to explore. So Dana, I'm totally with you. Rooms are a really, really cool addition to the Magic world here in 2024. Matt, what were your picks, though?
So I didn't go with rooms. I haven't actually gotten to cast one yet. I've only put a couple in decks. None of them really get me super excited. But one mechanic especially that, Dana, you mentioned we really like flexibility. This mechanic is all about having flexibility on the cards, is Spree.
Yeah.
So Spree was the mechanic where you can pay one or more additional costs in addition to the base cost of the spell to get all sorts of different modes out there. I love every time I've had a card with Spree in my hand, I've not been wanting for different options, whether it was 3 steps ahead, which was almost my instant of the year, being able to counter a spell or create a token, getting 2 new cards into my hand and getting to do some looting. It's that, or Insatiable Avarice, which is one of the most played sorceries of the year. There's all sorts of just flexibility baked into this mechanic. I really like how they made everything modal. And again, yes, quite literally everything is kicker. And how many times do you want to kick any given spell? But there's so many powerful spells, whether it's Requisition, Raid, Final Showdown, all sorts of things going on with spree cards that I really, really love. And if I want a card that I don't really know what I need it to be doing specifically, spree cards is a very, very good option to kind of fill that gap in my deck building process.
It's funny you say that about your instant, Matt. My instant that I almost picked was Return the Favor, the red Wild Ricochet that has been broken down into its component parts, because you can copy a spell by paying 1 extra, or change the targets of a spell by paying 1 extra, or do both if you pay both. And so you get the Wild Ricochet effect, which is a red spell I really, really enjoy. But when it's locked in, it being 4 mana, sometimes you don't have the ability to leave that up and cast it. Whereas Return the Favor, there's a little bit more flexibility for you to play around with there. And so, I quite agree. I would come close to picking Spree were it not for the room enchantments that happened this year. But Spree cards are very, very cool, and they keep popping up in my deck lists too.
I will second that. The Spree mechanic was the other one I was considering, along with the paw print mechanic from I forget what it was called in Bloomburrow, but that does a similar thing, and they found a way to execute a new, flavorful, interesting twist on something we've seen a billion times before. Yeah, but they made it feel fresh, and the cards were they also felt really well designed in that, like, you were forced to make really intelligent choices, and the choices you've made impacted the game in different ways every time. So I liked that mechanic in Spree a ton as well, and I think those are both really good picks, and I could have maybe on a different day gone with either of those two as well.
I think it's interesting. The top card that features a new mechanic of 2024, the top card of the year that features one of those new mechanics is Dawn's Truce, which is that thing that if you gift a card, that being the new mechanic gift, you'll be able to give your stuff hexproof and indestructible. Mm-hmm. We talked about this one as some of us like it, some of us don't. We feel like this is kind of a crowded field for protection, but like that potential group huggy ability, or you get some extra benefits if you give other people stuff. There are a handful of those gift cards that I do play myself. I think Parting Gust is very interesting. I think Wear Down is another one. I do enjoy that one. I'll give up a card if it means I can destroy 2 artifacts and or enchantments, things like that. The gift mechanic was also interesting this year, specifically because you have to measure up, like, can I make a temporary ally with giving an extra card or giving extra tokens or things like that? And the extra benefits that I get, what, quote, kicker am I excited to get off of those things here? Sure. So there's flexibility on those too. So I think that's kind of what we've noticed from a lot of the mechanics this year, basically, is that a lot of the mechanics this year really leaned into the flexibility and the different opportunities that they can unlock for you in games of Commander. So it's kind of an interesting running theme for the new mechanics of 2024.
Yeah, well, let's wrap up the show then. So we have one more category to get into, and it's the big one. It's the best film of the year type of category here. It is the best new Commander, and I don't know about you guys, but it's kind of a no-brainer to say this was the hardest one there, because there's so much that goes into choosing a single best new Commander.
Yeah, very crowded field. What did you end up going with though, Matt?
So for me, it could have been Bello, it could have been Nadu, it could have been Voja. Those, just looking at it from things on the aspect of power level. If I want just a brute force commander that all it's going to do is do some silly, powerful things, I think all 3 of those could have been very, very easy choices, very easy nominations. But there's fun decks out there too. There's Comball Profiteering Mayor, there's Balin the Haymaker, and the Wise Mothman got so many people active and interested in playing Commander. So there's a lot of really, really good options. It's so hard to say just one. I think if we're going to say one Commander that just made me go like, holy cow, like, what is this thing even doing? I think Bello, Bard of the Brambles, is probably my nominee, but that's not even bringing up like any of the Marvel commanders that came out, like Storm Force of Nature. Sure. That's probably one of the most broken commanders they've put out in the past couple of years.
Yeah. It's so wild.
I have played against Storm, and I will never let someone play against... I will let you play your deck. I just will never let you play your commander or untap with it in play.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was just so many just silly, powerful commanders. But if I had to choose just one that I thought created, again, the best experience is that I looked at that deck and said, holy cow, what is that even doing? I think Bellow Bard of Brambles is my pick there.
This is so interesting. Matt, I think I'm converging with you once again.
Oh.
I really hemmed and hawed about this a lot too. Because like the top commanders, you mentioned one of them, one of the most popular commanders of the year was Voya, Jaws of the Conclave. It's got 11,750 decks, ranked number 58 out of all of the legends from the past 2 years. And it's only been around for 1 year. That thing climbed the ranks really, really fast, and it's definitely one of those cards that reads as a bit of a mistake. Nadu, as well, was such a mistake that it got banned quite infamously, and had it not been banned, it definitely would have continued to climb. And the top commander from 2024 of this year was the Wise Mothman, showing up with 12,851 decks, ranked number 48 so far this year. And that was from the Fallout set, and I am surprised a little bit that you didn't pick a Fallout commander, because I know how much you love it.
It was hard not to pick Fallout, but I just, Wise Mothman isn't for me, but I know that got a lot of people excited.
Yeah, but there were so many options. Some of them leaned a little bit too heavily into what they were doing, but that isn't necessarily what I remember 2024 for. I don't remember it as the Voya and the Nadu year necessarily. I do kind of remember some of the cuteness and the playfulness while still having power and a little bit of that engine-y stuff. So Bellow, Bard of the Brambles, I think is also my pick. Animating your artifacts and enchantments that are big enough, letting you draw a couple of cards off of them if they do get to hit, making them indestructible so that you're not risking them too much in combat. It pushes games forward in a really interesting way. It's aggressive. The precon feels really fun right out of the box, and there's a lot of room for flexibility that doesn't necessarily feel like it's completely OP to me. That is the type of thing that I really enjoyed seeing. I don't play a lot of Gruul. I enjoy, though, playing against Gruul decks like this. So that's one of them that's really taken the cake for me, which I did not expect to be the case. But Bellow has really impressed me in a polite way compared to some of the other things that happened this year, I guess. I don't know how else to say it.
I think Matt just likes saying Bellow Bard of the Brambles. I think he just likes...
I think Patton Oswalt really likes saying Bellow Bard of Brambles.
Yeah. You and I and like 2 of our listeners right now remember that Patton Oswalt bit from 14 years ago.
Yeah.
I'm trying to check myself here because I can't help but wonder whether I feel this way about Bellow because it's a precon commander. So I'm associating that good feeling not just from Bellow as a card, but like from that whole deck. Like, is that another bias of mine or something? Because if I am going to talk about a full precon, then I'd actually totally pick the Valgavoth Rakdos Punisher precon. That thing is incredible. I played that precon against a group of very tuned decks this year, and I won handily on turn 8. It is a very, very good precon. So those are top contenders, but outside of just precon legends, I also look back on this year and remember standouts like Delny and the Jolly Balloon Man. Delny copying all those tiny creature triggers is very, very, very powerful, whereas the Balloon Man is really powerful by making token copies, but it still feels fair by making them 1/1. So there's a lot of room for ETB stuff or populate, a lot of flexibility there. And I guess that powerful but fair and flexible thing is also what initially drew me to Bellow. That effect is really, really good, and Bellow can draw you a whole lot of cards, but has that threshold of only counting your 4 mana stuff to make it happen, and not just counting like all your treasures, for instance. So I liked seeing that restriction. Kind of a lot of wild thoughts there. I think I'm going to go with my instinct and just simplify, pick the raccoon, but this is a hard choice to whittle things down. There are a lot of really intense options.
Yeah, well, what about you, Dana?
My pick here was Ophelia Viper Whisperer.
Okay.
1 and a black for Gorgon Assassin, 2 of the best card types to see on a card. It's a 1/3 with Death Touch, the best keyword to see on a card. When it attacks, you can pay 1 in a hybrid Golgari, and if you do, you make a 1/1 black snake creature token with Death Touch. The best kind of tokens are ones with Death Touch. and you can spend 4 in a black until end of turn whenever 1 or more Gorgons and or snakes you control deals combat damage to a player. That player loses half their life rounded up. I just love everything about like what that commander wants to do, but it doesn't hold your hand for it necessarily either. Like, you have to figure out how to give those things evasion or make them survive the obvious blocks that are going to happen. You do have to spend some mana to make those things occur each turn. So like, it requires some work to get there. I like things that are cool. I like that that's powerful. I like that it requires you to actually have to, come up with an interesting brew for it too. It's kind of my platonic ideal from what I see in a commander.
Yeah.
I love that the trajectory of this episode was Joey initially leaned into his biases, but for this final pick, I was like, I'll try and remove myself from this, whereas Dana's finally like, no, Death Touch stuff.
Not.
I love Death Touch stuff.
I can run Infernal Medusa in this deck, and I absolutely would want to do that.
Excellent. I feel like a lot of the Jumpstart commanders from the Foundation's Jumpstart packs would just be so much more popular if they weren't A, so hard to find, and B, so dang expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, you're looking at Ophelia, which is $50 right there.
Yeah.
You also have
Crazy.
cards like Evereth, Viceroy of Plunder, which is $30, and you have a $60 Rev Tithe Extractor. There's a lot of really, really expensive commanders out there, but just people aren't going to get a chance to see them, really.
At that price point, it's really, really difficult for sure.
Yeah.
This was a really interesting and engaging year for commanders, though. I went most of the year not building anything, and then by the end of the year, I think I built 3 commanders from one set. I've got a Marina deck, a Toby deck, and a Winter Cynical Opportunist deck, all from one set. So I certainly had a personal proclivity towards the Duskmourn set in ways that I didn't even anticipate to. But like those were fun, engaging things. I was really happy with the options that we got this year. I feel like there's even more I could continue to explore. So 2024, even though it did have the occasional Nadu situation, on the whole, the commander options that it came up with, I'm really tickled by them, especially the ones that started to emerge as the year was coming to a close. I think 2024 ended on a really great high note.
Yeah, we talked about that in our review of the sets of the year, how we all three just loved like the last half of the year that kind of Bloomburrow up through Foundation's run. And I'm still feeling that here a month later. I'm just really was happy where the whole game, the game as a whole, and Commander especially, went in regards to the cards they added in the back half of 2024, and has me really looking forward to 2025.
Yeah, the trajectory of where Magic is heading, when it comes to just what's on the cards, it is encouraging. They're getting wordy for sure. There are some things you can nitpick about, but overall, the health of the game, and especially Commander, I think we're in a very, very good spot, and we should be encouraged moving forward that there's going to be some really, really cool things down the pipeline too.
Yeah. So those were our picks. That was the Rifties of 2024. Listeners, you got to let us know which of these categories, which cards are you picking out there? What is your favorite commander of the year, your favorite instant of the year? Which cards did we miss that are your favorites? Do you think that we're off our rocker, that the top cards of each of those categories, the most popular ones, are those officially the cards of the year? Or are there some hidden gems that were scattered throughout the year that you think deserve a little bit more love and they deserve some more accolades and awards instead? Let us know. And indeed, when folks do let us know, as we're calling this episode to a close, guys, where can our listeners get in touch with us to let us know about their picks? Dana?
You can find me online at Dana Roach. I'm especially on Blue Sky these days. I'm writing articles for EDHREC and Commander's Herald, and you can find all of us together at patreon.com/EDHRECast.
And Matt, how about you?
So you can find me at pretty much any social media platform at Mathimus55. That's MATHIMUS55. And don't forget, if you need to check out Cardsphere.com, well, it's a great way to exchange all your old cards for some great new cards, help building decks, and stretch your dollar farther than any other site out there. So make sure you check out Cardsphere.com.
And I'm Joey Schultz. You can find me at Joseph M. Schultz everywhere online, mostly on places like Instagram or Blue Sky. And you can find the cast everywhere online at EDHRECast. Plus, if you got a question for us, you can contact us at EDHRECast@gmail.com. Listeners, we'll be back at you next week with more data and insights. But until then, remember, EDHREC your deck before you wreck your deck.